Dunrovin Ranch in Lolo, Montana. First of all, I'd like to wish you all a wonderful Martin Luther King Day. I'm just so excited that we have a community in which all of us promote kindness and generosity to one another. And I think that is all in keeping with the spirit of Martin Luther King. And I hope that you all enjoy the day. And I really appreciate you being here with us for our community. And in that spirit, I'm really glad to welcome Brandon Carpenter back this week with some more information from Hashknife Ranch. Today, I think he's going to show us some branding on one of his horses. And once we're finished with his videos, he and I will talk about branding animals and why it's important. And we do our branding a little bit differently than Brandon does. So stay tuned after his videos for a conversation with Brandon and me about branding. And with that, I'll ask James to let the videos roll. James, thank you.
Hello from the Hashknife. Today we're going to do what none of us really like to do on the horses, and that's put a brand on them. We're going to clean this 2-year-old gelding up a little bit, put this brand on his shoulder right here, which you can see he's been laying around in the muck, and it's been wet, and he's got some hair, heavy hair there, but the Hashknife goes on a left shoulder on horses. So we want to place that brand right about here, and we wait until he's this age, or they're a little larger. You could brand them much earlier like the yearling, but then you'd have a brand that would be like this big. It'd just be huge and unsightly. So we're going to go ahead and stick that on him now that he's mostly mature. He's almost coming, he's 2.5 years old, so at 5 he'll be fully mature with his bone growth. But for the most bit, he won't grow to be much more than about this tall. So good time to do it. It's cool. We're at the end of December, and so we're not going to have any fly issues. What we do have is an issue of him being a little bit pushy. There we go. No. So I got to start working with him. But that's why we wait as late as we do to do this, so we don't have this huge brand. And we are doing this a whole lot different than we did when I was a kid. I can remember my dad's dad had a habit of wanting to do things the way he was taught as a kid, because it worked. And the way they did that with especially a young stud colt is we'd wait till they were about this time of year, maybe even into February, to castrate them. But the way we did that was all by hand. We didn't have a vet come do it. And I've done this myself even being older, but the way we took them down and held them down took several people. So we would have the horse in a corral like this, in a round corral or a larger square pen, and then whoever's handiest with a rope would rope the front foot of that horse, the two front feet, pull him up, and then just lay him down. And then everybody, as soon as he hit the ground, everybody would jump together and hold a head down and hold those front feet and get a rope on another hind leg while they're down and on their side, and we would literally just hold that horse down while a grandpa or dad, one of the uncles, would go ahead and prepare them for, it was basically a surgery, and you're doing it with just a hot or a real sharp scalpel, or your pocket knife had been prepared for that. Our pocket knives do have a castrating blade on them, so we would use that, lay the horse down, and while they were down, then we would go ahead and also put a brand on them. It takes a lot of people. It's pretty traumatic to the horse because he's not being knocked out. He's not being sedated at all. And that's, really kind of a tough way to do it. Over the years, we have done this differently now, where we castrate in the spring, and I go ahead and have a vet do it. I just call a vet. He comes out, or she comes out, and sedates them, castrates them, and they'll pull wolf teeth, but they're still too small to brand. So now branding is at a separate time, just as it is like we're going to do today. So we'll show you how we used to do after we quit laying a horse down. We used to use the corral post and basically bring this horse in here, and it would take a couple of us to do it. and we would just squeeze them in right behind this. We'd tie them up so they're standing here, and then just push them over and squeeze them up, and then we could brand, and we'd be much tighter than this, but the horse would be held up there to the end of the hinge of the gate, and then we would just reach through, kind of more of a safety thing. After we'd blindfolded him, we put a light blanket that we used to sack the horse with in training, or a light saddle blanket, and so they can't see what's going on, and then we would go ahead and brand them through here so that we could reduce any risk to ourselves or to the horse. We've really gotten away from that too in the last few years. You know, you can always learn something from somebody else, and I watched a friend of ours helped him brand a horse. He asked if he could get some help, and I said sure. So we put a blindfold on him, and then we just did it standing up. One of us held it while the other one went ahead and he laid the brand on there. So, you know, just because we have done things for a long time doesn't mean that there isn't a better way to do it. And that's kind of the moral of this. We used to lay these horses down. It was kind of rough. And now, after that, we started pinching them in here, kind of taking a little bit more of the safety factor in mind. And now it's just a matter of putting a blindfold on them, sticking the brand on them, and then it's really pretty anticlimactic, you hope. They still can jump and move around a bit because there's a little bit of pain. It's a burn. But we'll show what we're going to do next and why we do it. So we got a few tools here. Obviously, we got to have the brand go on. And we'll take the top part of it. We'll put this in a two-piece brand. Put it on first, and then we'll go back. And with the second one, then we'll put the bottom of the Hashknife on. If you did this in one piece, there's so much heat that gets built up between these two portions that it will cause a large scar here with the horse. And so we want to avoid that by putting it on in two pieces. A horse's skin is not very thick. If you feel your arm and you do that, or your wrist, that's about the thickness of a horse's hide. So it's be like branding us, and you can see these are fairly large. I mean, they're not like a cow iron where they're 3/8 of an inch wide. These guys this is only about 1/4 inch. And so we want to get these hot enough that it will obviously burn through the hair and then just burn the hide a little bit and cause a disruption of the hair pattern as it grows and basically makes a scar. And we do this right. It isn't really super painful. I mean, he's going to feel some heat, but it's not going to be something that, you know, we didn't need to doctor or put anything on at all. It should just heal just fine on its own, especially with no flies or anything like that this time. You're disrupting and trying to chew on him on that wound site. So two pieces in this brand together, and that's the reason why. And we got this, it's like a half of a saddle blanket, an old Navajo blanket that is wore out. We use it for sacking. We'll blindfold him with that, and then of course a torch here, and then we need a holder and a horse, and we are all set. So we've kind of prepped his shoulder a little bit, and we will heat this up first, and before we blindfold him, have it ready. But we'll just do kind of a dry run here without him knowing what's going on. We're going to put that brand about right there, and then the second one will come in about like right there. So it's in his shoulder area, and you don't want it crooked. You want it to be, take some care that his leg is fairly straight up and down, and then lay that in there, and then lay that in there. Now it's cool, and we'll get this pretty hot, but it's a cool day, so this will cool quickly, and then it also cools as it burns through any hair here. We could shave this, but his hair is not super, super long, so I think we'll probably be okay. So you got a shoulder brand on a horse, and then you've got also, if this was registered on the thigh, you put it down here. On a cow, you put up on the hip, down here on the thigh, about in there on a horse. And then, believe it or not, there are some horse brands that are registered that goes on the jaw, and that is, I can't believe that somebody will want a jaw brand on a horse, and I haven't seen one really for a long, long time. Now, why do we brand? This is a identifier just as it is on a cow, so that if this horse goes somewhere it can be identified, or what we can identify it as our horse, or, you know, if it comes up missing, or then we sell the horse and then we give a transfer of ownership with this brand on it, then that also identifies this horse. It comes in handy. Several years ago, we got a call from a brand inspector in Bozeman, which you're looking, you know, as a crow flies 100 miles away. And they said there were 2 horses that were loose in downtown Bozeman, down on the main street. And it was actually the hay hook, which is my mom and dad's brand, on a right shoulder. That's where that brand goes. My mom said, well, that's our brand. That's the location. And they said, well, these horses we can't get a hold of them. We can't find the owner. We don't know who it is. And she was able to tell them who we had sold the horses to. They contacted them and was able to retrieve their horses. Wasn't even their brand, but because of the traceability and who that brand belongs to, then we were able to tell them where it went. So theft is still a big deal in Montana and some of our western states on horses. You see quite often people will be reporting that a horse or several horses, sometimes horse and saddle, sometimes horse saddle, trailer, and pickup are all gone. And pictures of them and identifying marks so that they can try to retrieve them back. So things haven't changed a lot in 150 years. We're still using brands to identify our animals. And there is a difference in some. This is a hot brand. Some people will use a white mark, which basically is a freeze brand. If you see a white one on there, this means they've taken these irons or irons like this and cooled them in nitrogen to the point where they put them on and then it freezes the hair follicle so it does not come back as a natural color. It fills in white forever after that. So we'll fire this thing up, get this heated up, and blindfold him and see if we can't make this happen, put a decent brand on him and have him not be really too upset about it. Go away. I'm gonna brand that kitty.
Might scare her off.
We're just ready to put the blindfold on this horse, and my son Braden says, you know what? Why don't we skip the blindfold this time and see if I can just cover an eye and see how it goes, just so we don't amp him up, just the very fact that we're taking all of his eyesight away. So we're going to give that a shot and see how it works along with this. One of the reasons why we've gotten away from squeezing him up into a gate, Kalen wanted me to show you this. If you look at the size of my fingers, they're a little bit different. There's a little wider and flatter on this side because than it is on the other. Because when we branded here, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we had about a dozen head to do and put them in here, and one of them fought really hard and was throwing his head around, and I just happened to be pushing the gate at the same time and hit my fingers with his jaw and broke my fingers. So we had to, I threw some snow on that. We kept going, and then once it was done, then I drilled down through my fingernails to relieve the pressure because it sure did mangle them a little bit, and I thought, you know what, we don't really want to do that again. So we keep improvising and trying to innovate and make things better. So we'll see how this goes by him just covering an eye and keeping it as quiet as we can do.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Hey, Brandon, I really appreciated that video because I have to tell you honestly, I haven't been at a horse branding with a hot iron in a very long time. And I was really amazed by number one, the light reaction that the horse had. He reacted, but it was not anything traumatic at all. And I really also appreciated your explaining the depth into the skin that the brand goes. Could you cover that again a little bit? Because, you know, we lost the audio at the very end of your video, and I'd like viewers to understand.
Yeah, guys, I wish. Yeah, I'm sorry. The one thing you guys want to hear more of is my voice on a on a broadcast. But no, you know, we tend to think more in terms of cows, right? I mean, we all know how thick leather can be. A leather belt, shoes, boots. Those are all, you know, made out of leather, and a cow's hide very, very thick. But a horse is not. A horse's hide is very thin and very much comparable to our own skin, literally in depth of the epidermis, and the dermis. So if you think about how much time it would take for you to get a brand on you, I mean, it's not very long. I mean, we scar pretty easily. And the horses will too. The difference is they've got all that hair to go through, and that's what you saw was the smoke that was coming off of the shoulder when the brand was applied on a hot brand. Then it, you're burning through that, and you'll notice he stood there quite a while until it got to the skin, and really, I think on the video, I explained that when they've had enough, when it's hot enough that it burns them and they move away, that's the time to pull it away. You can't do that with a cow because you'll never get that brand on with a cow because of the very thickness of the hide and how far those hair follicles are embedded in there. So, we've all had one burn or another on us from grabbing a skillet or something on a hot stove or anything that's been hot. So it doesn't take much, and that's the key. I think at the end, I talked about, did I talk or could you hear about the horse that I had done that the iron was not very hot?
No, tell us that.
Okay. Yeah, there was a horse that we had done. Oh my God, this has been 30 years ago. We were in a spot where we couldn't get fuel really easily with propane torch. And so we had to improvise, and we just built a fire and got the irons down in the fire, and they weren't super hot. They weren't a really red, nice, rose red glow is what you want to have on the heat of the iron. And so we stuck it in these ashes or these coals. Didn't get it that hot, and I went ahead and I put the top part of the brand on the shoulder of the horse, and it just barely smoked at the most. It's like, okay. And I just held it there, and the horse didn't respond at all. Thought, well, okay, these irons are just too cold. We're going to have to just get him another day. And so I should have, just for fun, grabbed the bottom part of the brand and put it on him, but I didn't. And because we knew it's just too cold, it's not going to work. Lo and behold, that hide healed, and it made the most beautiful brand you can imagine. But the amount of time that I held that on there, it didn't hurt him, but it was just enough that it disrupted that hair pattern. So we did put the rest of the brand on another time with a hot iron, but that was a very, very big learner for me about heat, time, temperature, and how much tolerance they will give you. Obviously, it did the same amount of interruption of those hair follicles and basically scarring that it did with a hot iron, but it just took a lot more time. So it is much easier to hit them. And I say hit them, I mean just, apply that brand with a nice hot iron for a very short amount of time. And that way you've got it. You don't have to redo it. And then it's a complete deal.
So Brandon, I use a cold iron. I use a liquid nitrogen. And for those who are watching, the liquid nitrogen cold iron does not leave a scar. What it does is it kills the color in the hair follicles. So you shave the horse, you apply the cold iron, and generally I anesthetize only the area. It needs to be applied for a longer time than what I saw you apply. And you need to have a really nice, even pressure. And what it does, there's no scarring involved, but as the hair grows back, it grows back white instead of the color of the horse. And for me, I use a brass branding iron. And one of the most important parts of a branding iron is you have really sharp edges so that the edge of the brand is really definitive. So I wanted to ask you, what is your branding iron made of, Brandon?
Well, that's a good point. And that must have been the end of the video because I covered exactly that about freeze branding versus hot branding.
Yeah.
But our irons, the horse ones are made out of just rolled steel. We had those made. Those were made. I think those were actually, that set of irons was a present from my parents, a Christmas present. Oh my goodness, I must have been maybe I was in high school. I probably was. And so I've had those irons since then. And, you don't use them that often. They're not doing, thousands of head of horses. Certainly that's been on a lot of horses, but not thousands. But the cow irons are a little bit different in that they are a piece of bar steel that is got a lot more height to it. It's about an inch high, and that helps hold the heat. The heat will transfer down that iron into the very edge where it does touch the animal. Just as you say, a really good iron is beveled a little bit so that it will transfer that temperature to a smaller spot, but still disrupt the hair. And so those are, and I've made all of our cow irons and calf irons, and it's just, they're out of steel, and you form them and then put a handle on them, weld them together, and there you go. You want to get it the right size, of course, and be able to get the shape right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your specific brand. Number one, it's 2 parts, and it doesn't have any letters, so it has a kind of a different designation. It's called is it a symbol brand? What's the name of your brand?
Yes, it's a symbol brand, and it's actually it's a one piece brand, but it can be put on in 2 halves. You could put that on because it's simply that. It's just a symbol. And so it doesn't have 2 letters. But if I was to put that thing on, I think I explained that how that would blotch. That's why we do it in 2 pieces, so that it doesn't cause this huge, big heat scar there. So it's a nice defined bottom to that. But it's a symbol. The state of Montana, that brand actually is only on horses on the left shoulder and only on cows on the left rib in the entire state. There's nowhere else that brand is available. And I have tried to put it on other areas, and the state brand office refuses to let me do that because they don't like symbol brands. They would just assume that I drop that brand and not renew it, and they would never issue it again because they want 3 letters or 3 character brands. So it's much more difficult to alter. Well, this brand is pretty tough to alter, as it stands. So, and it's, it's part of my family's heritage. It's been my great grandfather's brand. So, bite me, state of Montana.
Yeah, absolutely. People don't understand that brands are like shields. They go with the family, they go with the property, they go with the business, and they're really an important part of our heritage. And a lot of people, when I started Dunrovin Ranch, I said that I was going to get a brand, and people said, "Well, why are you going to do that, Suzanne? What on earth? Why would you need to brand a horse?" And this was, recent enough that this was during the time when people were microchipping their horses. And I'd like you to explain why we in the West would prefer a brand to a microchip.
Well, it goes with the good and the bad. That's a really good question. The same thing we do with our horses, and I'll be doing an upcoming segment on DNA gathering on our horses for registration purposes. But if you've got a horse that's microchipped, you can't tell what that microchip is unless that horse is in your hand. And if you've got a herd of horses out there, and I've got a couple of horses, we have a good number of horses that are solid black. And unless you can tell me which horse is which, you really got no business going on somebody else's property to say, that's my horse, and you cannot tell. So part of it is being able to easily identify that horse from a distance, and that's what the whole thing is about, so that you can be, across a fence line or see that horse in a place where you have the legal ability to be, and then I say, yeah, that's definitely my horse. Now, all it does is identifies your horse. It doesn't necessarily verify which horse it is. It's just that it belongs to you and your area. So your DNA or your microchipping would come into a verification of that horse, not just an identification. If that subtle difference makes sense.
Well, and microchipping in terms of a lost horse in the wilderness or even a stolen horse is not nearly as useful as a brand, a physical brand. If somebody who has horse stealing on their mind sees a branded horse versus an unbranded horse, they're going to take the unbranded horse because it's very difficult to trace. And the other thing is that you can quickly identify to people who know nothing about horses. If you see a horse that has this brand on this placement in the backcountry, and people do lose horses in the backcountry, it's inevitable. If you're going to be in the backcountry for a long time, that something happens and horses get away, and no matter how hard you look, you sometimes have to abandon the search for a period of time. So the fact that it's branded, you can alert the whole world to the fact that your horse is out there and it belongs to you. So I think a physical brand is a really important part of being a responsible horse owner if you're going to be going into the backcountry.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's another aspect of that a lot of people don't think of, and that's when I was in law enforcement, particularly working in the backcountry, you may run across somebody who's got a string of horses or string of mules, and they refuse to tell you who they are. That brand is a license plate. Yeah. I may not be able to tell that it's necessarily theirs, but that animal is somewhat traceable. And if you've got more than a couple of those horses or mules that are packing the same brand, it's a really good chance that whoever's the one in guiding or holding that horse or those animals in a string, that's theirs or they're associated with the owner. So you don't think of those things on those terms from from the bad guy, good guy perspective. It just changes a little bit, but it's very, very similar to horse wrestling or cattle wrestling of the past. You would identify people by what horse they were riding. If that brand was on that animal, there's all kinds of ways that, they can be traced back to you. So this still in many ways, the West hasn't changed for us in the last 150 years. And we're not exaggerating that. It's a reality.
Well, and I also, many horses that are stolen end up at stockyards for the sales. And I don't know this for sure, but I would bet that there are stockyards that don't have chip readers anymore. I mean, some of the big ones do, I'm sure. But lots of smaller stockyards don't even have a chip reader. So they have no way of knowing whether that without some kind of a brand inspection. And if you don't have a brand, you don't have a brand inspection. I mean, it just goes all the way down the line. If your horse is not in that system, then it's more vulnerable to a lot of other things.
Yeah, that's true. And to show you the looseness of that, I mean, they know me at the brand office because I will go in and I will have annual inspections or a permanent inspection done or transfer of ownerships when we sell a horse. And oftentimes I will do a annual inspection on someone else's behalf. I will act as their agent of someone that I'm training a horse for. And they may not have a brand on that horse. And I can walk in there and say, okay, this person owns this horse. They just need an annual inspection. All of a sudden, they can just go out, they look at the horse, they write down what the horse looks like and literally draw a picture of marks on their legs and typically their face, the blaze star snip that's on their face. So they have a record or a match of that. Well, if I'd have stolen that horse and I'd have said, this person wants that, and I'm laundering this horse, they have just given me the ability to have a free pass for this horse now. And you know how many times I've been asked or anyone's asked if they could microchip or scan for a chip on a horse? Never, ever, never been done. Yeah. But at the same time, there are pictures of horses that have been stolen hanging on the brand office wall too, that they're, looking for if it happens to come by. But unless it's really fresh in their mind, it's like the wanted poster that you get used to walking by in the post office. Pretty soon you quit looking at it. And that happens, I think, a lot.
Yeah, I have the same kind of a relationship with our brand inspectors here in Missoula County. And I have encouraged some of my friends who do not have a brand to have their horses branded with my brand. I don't know if you remember my friend Sally Sook.
Oh, yeah.
She had her horse branded with the Dunrovin brand. I've had several people do that because they recognize the utility. And now I have, and with that brand, I did a sale for no money at all, but there's paperwork that goes with that brand. And so were that horse to show up anywhere with that brand, I get contacted, and then I can contact them. So it's a way of really ensuring that they get the benefits of my brand without having to have their own brand.
That's exactly, yeah. And we have done the same thing, literally brand it. And then all of a sudden there's a little trust factor that goes in there. Cause when you put your brand on that horse, legally, that's your horse.
Yeah.
You could say, "Yep, no, you know what? That brand is on it. That's my horse." And there has been some horse deals that have gone awry, that way. And but yeah, you just simply then go to the brand office and you say, "Hey, we're going to transfer ownership on this horse, and we want a lifetime ownership for them," and it's a done deal, and the horse is now identified that way. So, yeah, the brand office is very good. They know that I don't have a lot of, or they don't have a lot of experience with, say, walking horses or the gaited horse community, and they know I do. And it was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, they called me. The brand office called me and said, "Hey, we've got this horse here, and they've got a registration for it, but there's no other papers for it. Can you help us to verify ownership on this?" And I was happy to do it, but they had no idea because they went through a registration, a national registry, which only verifies parentage of that horse. It really doesn't do that much for ownership because horses change owners, and those papers can change unless they update them with that registry. It's a moot point. So, yeah, when you have a good relationship with them, you hope that if you forget a brand inspection and you're going down the road, you kind of get a mulligan for that. Not that you'd say, "Hey, do you know who I am?" Well, they don't care.
Exactly. So the last aspect I'd like to talk about is how you get a brand. And I went through that process. And as Brandon pointed out, the brand is not just the symbol, but it's specific to either cattle or horses. And horses include mules and donkeys, by the way. It's an equine brand, really. And then it's very specific to the location. Somebody could have my same symbol in a different place on a horse, but they can't. Mine's a right shoulder brand. Yours is a left shoulder brand. And Mystery will soon have both. But that's what happened when Brandon sold Mystery to me. You see, I had to have a brand inspector come out. He had to sign papers. I had to sign papers. And that's exactly what happens. But it's a several month process to get a brand registered with the state of Montana. And this is a question I have never had to answer before, so I really want an answer from this, Brandon. Sally Sook took her horse to Colorado. She lives in Colorado now. So here is her horse with my brand on it in Colorado. I assume that there is good communication between the brand offices of the various Western states. How does that go?
Yeah, it depends on the state. There are some states that are a no brand state. You don't even have to have a brand on an animal. So Colorado, I've sold some horses that went to Colorado. The same thing. If they have a lifetime type of laminated brand inspection, and that's their horse, and they've come from Montana, the other states are supposed to recognize that, have reciprocity with that brand and that inspection at that point, if that's still the owner. But if that changes ownership, the horse changes ownership to someone else in Colorado, then they would have to get a Colorado inspection to do that. Now, some of the brand offices, they don't like to do that because they want some of the revenue off of that, because every time you do a brand inspection, say a lifetime one, I think that's $35 for a very fast, quick. It takes 10 minutes to do that, and you're talking a lot of horses. So, and they also like to be able to have their own inspectors looking at their own paperwork. There's that aspect too, and I can understand that part from that state. But yeah, those are supposed to have reciprocity on that. Now, what you cannot do is say I sell a horse to someone in a neighboring state, say somebody in Wyoming, and I sell that horse here, and I do a transfer of ownership with a permanent brand inspection in their name. You're not supposed to do that. They won't recognize that because they should be transferred to them in their state. You can just give them a bill of sale. So there are a few parameters to that, which really is kind of reasonable because that person lives in that state anyway. It isn't like they came from outside one state or to that state from another state.
Right. Well,
you probably have gotten a letter in the mail from the state of Montana, the brand or the Department of Livestock lately, saying, "Hey, it's time to renew your brand," and that's coming up.
I just did that, Brandon. Online for the first time. They have it online where you can re-up. Yep.
I saw that. We've got a total, I think, of 7 brands that we have to renew because Lisa's got 1 or 2. Actually, Kaylin and I did an entire episode in our Hashknife Hangouts on brands and the different ones we've got. So most of them are family brands, have been passed down kind of together. There's a couple that aren't. I got one for Braden, my youngest son, when he was, I think he was in junior high school, but he was coming up, had a couple of horses, and he needed to have them branded. So I spent a considerable amount of time at the brand office, physically there in Helena, looking for a decent brand, because there's a lot of garbage out there that you wouldn't want to put on your horse.
Yeah.
Really tough stuff. So anyway, yeah, it's for 10 years, I think was $175 to renew a brand this year. So you got, break that down, it's $17 a year. It's not bad. It's a 10-year certificate. So it's, you can't complain too much. I can remember when it was like $100, I think, or less to renew a brand. Crazy.
So, all of this has really prompted me to say to everybody that when we brand Augie and Mystery, we'll do it online for sure. So you can see the difference and you can see how we do it here at Dunrovin. And I really appreciate this episode of Brandon. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to our wonderful wrangler, Ashley. I think she's ready. Are you there, Ashley?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Outstanding. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Brandon.
Thank you, Brandon, and have a good training session with Ashley and Augie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Suzanne. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.